Thanks to the region of Emilia-Romagna for organizing and hosting the event. Thanks to JobTown for having inspired this event into the city of Cesena. I'm not here to tell you what needs to be done to solve the youth unemployment issue. You are best placed to think of the solutions that are needed to address that problem. Coming from, and having worked for now 20 years on regional policy, we do believe that the Union does not know best. You know best what needs to be done. What the Union can provide is a framework, our guidance, our tools, but the concrete solutions are only those that are close to the ground and to the specificities of the different territories that can find the right policy combination and policy mixes. So what I would like to do very quickly is to provide you with a more general framework against which this debate is taking place at the Union level, and on a few topics, issues that you may want to be aware of when you think of the current and particularly the next generations of programs, projects, strategies that will be put in place in your regions, country, and city. You will not be surprised to me to start by saying that obviously all the discussions that is taking place at the Union level is set against the economic crisis that the Union and the world at large, in fact, is facing. This crisis is there to stay. Let's not make any mistake. It's not something that is going to go away quickly. All projections suggest that for the next year, this year, next year, Europe and some important countries in Europe will still face declining contractions of their economy, and it's only in 2014 that we will start to see the beginning of our recovery. The social consequences of this crisis are also going to stay, probably for much longer than a year and a half. As Lorenza said, the impact that this crisis had on unemployment, particularly on youth unemployment, are being dramatic, and before our economy will be able to absorb those losses and those lack of opportunities, to give responses to those lack of opportunities, it will take time. You know that youth unemployment is on average at the Union level about 23%. Everybody knows that in Spain that figure goes up to more than 40, but not many people know that in Sweden, youth unemployment is at 23%, and in Poland, it is one of the few countries that have had positive growth rates in the past years, is 27%. And the 3 out of 4 regions, 3 out of 4 regions in the Union have an unemployment rate that is twice the youth unemployment rate that is twice the average unemployment rate. So there is clearly a concentration of problems there. And you may have noticed that our heads of government and state have at last recognized that there is an issue. I'm a bit sarcastic there, but it's only in January this year that in the European Council member states and governments say, well, there is a youth unemployment problem, let's do something. Which is good, because now the issue is on the agenda of the Union, and something is happening. You may have heard that, particularly in the context of cohesion policy of structural funds, we have engaged with the member states in a process of reprogramming, rethinking what are the margins of maneuver within the current programs, the current money available, to see whether something more can be done to tackle a youth unemployment issue. And at the end of the day, about 7–8 billion euro have been reprogrammed in the past few months to try to tackle specifically the youth unemployment. My second point is that this crisis is having 2 consequences on what has revealed 2 problems. The first is a general problem, but that is exerting some pressure and creating some difficulties in the way public policies are developed. And this is the tension that has been on the European agenda for months, about the need on the one hand to consolidate budgets, fiscal discipline, rigor, and on the other hand to promote growth. And obviously my feeling at least is that we have been quite good on the first element of this equation, but for the moment there are not many ideas on how to tackle the growth issue. Also because there is not much money out there, and precisely because we are consolidating. And this tension is not going away. And the second consequence of this crisis and of this tension is that it's putting pressure on public investment, public policies, not only from a quantitative point of view, in the sense that there is less and less resources available for you, for local authorities, for regional authorities, for member states to carry out pro-cyclical public investment policy, but also the quality of these policies. There is increasing scrutiny on how effective, how efficient that money is spent, particularly if that money is coming from the euro budget, from the union budget. And this takes me to my third and last point, which is what this means for the current debate going on at the union level in particular on the discussion on the future budget of the union. Why this is important? Well, because that, in reality, is going to be in many member states the only public money available to carry out investments. Already now, in a large number of member states, structural funds, cohesion policy represent up to 60–70% of their public investment capacity. And this is likely that this is going to increase in the future, not to decrease. And therefore, the discussion on the budget of the union is important from this point of view. What is at the center of the discussion? And you probably have heard that there is an attempt to close, to find a deal on the budget for 2014-2020, the next financial programming period of the Union at the end of November. At the center of that debate, there is precisely the question of how to ensure that every euro that is spent in Cantabria, in Sweden, in the France, in Emilia-Romagna, can prove to be used in the most effective way. And the member states that are going to pay to foot the bill of the European budget are saying, well guys, we are even ready to put that money on the table, but you need to prove it. And we need to agree on the conditions for the use of those resources. I'm saying this because this is going to have an influence on the way you define and conceive the next round of structural investments and co-financed by the union budget. Also because that reflection needs to start now. The next programs needs to be ready in the next few months. I don't know whether you are aware or you have known the broad lines of the proposal that the Commission has put on the table for cohesion policy. I'm concentrating on cohesion policy or regional policy or the structural funds, whatever you want to call it, because that is the investment budget that is going to be transferred to regional member states and local authorities. And this is relevant, I think, in the context of this debate today. There are, I think, three main ideas and three main principles that you need to think about. The first is very simply, you need to make choices. Now, you will say, oh, that's obvious, we always make choices. But there is a widespread feeling out there that in reality, structural funds resources, cohesion policy resources are spread too thinly on too many things. And I would like to agree, partially at least, with that notion. So what the Commission is saying, what some member states are saying very clearly, you local authority, you region, you member state, you will receive X amount of million euros, but you have to make choices. And those choices have to be coherent with what we are discussing and agreeing at the EU level. Our head of state and government, again, every 6 months they meet and they decide on which are the priorities for investment, what are the main areas where resources, public resources need to be invested to ensure growth and job creation. It was called the Lisbon Strategy, now it's called the Euro 2020 Agenda, tomorrow it is. But there is a European agenda. So the first question that you need to ask yourself is whether the priorities that you're setting yourself are coherent with that agenda, and whether you concentrate in your dialogue with local, regional, and national authorities, whether you concentrate enough resources on those priorities. The second element for your reflection at this part of the Commission proposal is that you need to set targets. You need to be very clear on what you want to achieve. Now again, you will say, well, you know exactly what we want to achieve. Well, I can assure you that we have a tremendous difficulty to provide a simple story about what the structural funds are trying to achieve. This doesn't mean that they're not achieving anything, but that the system of construction, definition of targets or objective tends to be a bit fuzzy. And there is a need to be much clearer, to be examined at the beginning of the programming period, much clearer on what we want to achieve and how to measure progress toward those objectives. This is a matter of transparency. It is a matter of public accountability. And this is exactly what Europe on the one hand and member states on the other are asking. There has been discussion, and I think that the end we will end up with a regular rendezvous at European level, at political level, to discuss how regional policies, local policies, national policies, co-financed by the European budget, are performing, which is not the case today. The last and final point, which I think is relevant and raises some difficult questions, is how to develop integrated packages. How to ensure that when you're trying to address that issue or any other issue, you and us, believe me, I'm also talking to the Commission in this case, overcome sectoral boundaries. The Commission has tried, we will see later on whether successfully or not, to put on the table a proposal that tries to overcome those boundaries. We now have a legislative package, rules that govern the use of the structural funds that are common for the first time in years to all the structural funds. So we're basically saying, look, when you're trying to address those issues, you need to conceive training, education policies on the supply side, but you also need to integrate those investment with investment on the demand side, looking at how the SMEs are doing, what kind of services are needed, even to look at what kind of infrastructures in certain cases can help in an integrated way and coherent way to address these problems. So choices, clarity of targets, and integration, cross-sectoral integration, I think are going to be the key words, the key elements of the discussion on the future of cohesion policy at the European level in the current phase of discussion of the resources, of the money, and of the rules that govern the money, but also in the discussion with you in the next few months on the programs and the strategies that you will present. And with that, I will stop and happy to to engage in a discussion.